poor people to treat slaves like Onesimus, and Paul treated Onesimus in the book. I think it's the book of Timothy. So, but basically, the bottom line is that I think we can all look at the ideals and the universal moral principles and say that treating. I think we could all agree with the golden rule: treat others as you would have yourself be treated.
Frustrated?
And I think that's sort of the bottom line with what Christ was saying.
Okay, so to address what SJ just said, I was saying that we have moral monsters, yes, but the thing is that most of these people throughout history who were justifying slavery were using the Bible to justify slavery. This was not something that was...
They were using the Bible in a mistaken way. So
they were not misusing it in any way, shape, or form. They were using the parts that fit their narrative, just like everybody who ever uses the Bible for any justification ever uses it to fit their narrative. You can sit there and find verses that show that it's against slavery. You can find verses more often than not that show that it's for slavery. You can find it in every aspect of the Bible, no matter what the situation is. It doesn't matter. You can sit there and tell me the verse of Timothy where Jesus had sit there and said whatever to the slaves, but the thing is that you're still going to find people who use this Bible to justify the slavery.
Let me give you one basic example of why these people were fundamentally incorrect. And the reason is because it says very specifically in the Bible that you are not to kidnap slaves. And that's exactly how the slave trade was built in the United States. So even the people who were benefiting from those who kidnapped slaves would be held accountable according to the Bible, and they were subject to capital punishment.
No.
Because that is something very...
One second, Frustrated. Let her finish her thought. And then
I apologize.
Go ahead, Ashley.
No, I'm just saying that there, yes, we have people who are misusing the Bible through the years, and I think it's awful. And you and I can both agree to that. I mean, it's not appropriate to grab a book and try to cherry pick it to say that, my book's perfect, and I'm going to find this one a line in the middle of a phrase, and I'm going to say that I can mistreat you and I can beat you up and we can kidnap slaves, and then ignore what it very clearly says in the Bible about the treatment of slaves, and looking to the way that Paul basically said Onesimus is a brother and he's an equal.
Okay, Frustrated?
Okay, so one thing that you have mistaken is that all of the transatlantic slave route was pure stealing. And no, it wasn't. They were a lot of times the Aborigines did give their people up willingly. They traded their people a lot of times as well. So, I mean, you can't say that they just strictly went over there and said, okay, I have guns here, I'm going to kill y'all who try to stop me from taking your people. They went over there and traded willingly. And so you can't say that they sat there and did that at all. There's no argument for that. But again, they use the Bible just like everybody else uses the Bible for their own means. You can't, and to say, oh, well, they're misusing it. How are they misusing it? If they are reading it straight from the Bible and saying that this is my justification because my Bible says so, then you have no basis to say that they are wrong about that.
You don't exegete properly, Frustrated. You don't. You're a bad exegeter.
Let me clarify something, SJ. I think what he's trying to say is the fact that you say that it's being misused. However, rather than just coming out and saying slavery is wrong, or you should not own slaves, or you should not, owning people is bad, it instead gives instructions on how they're to be treated. Therefore, by proxy, condoning it, not coming out and saying this is wrong. That's the ultimate point. The fact that it doesn't explicitly say owning people is wrong. Instead, it gives you instructions on how to treat those that you have in captivity. Therefore, essentially saying it's okay, but look, as long as you're going to own people, you need to at least treat them this way. So I think that's where we're at with that. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Looks like Joshua might have a response.
if I could, yeah, thank you so much. I don't think that's right. Looking at the Bible, it's often reporting things that aren't in good light. And I think that's an argument, while we can trust its authenticity in the Old Testament, that they're not cherry picking and trying to make it look as good as they can, but there were regulations as compared to the neighboring civilizations, which I do teach also, like Mesopotamia and Egypt and the Indus River Valley, not to mention Chinese civilization. There were so many other civilizations where anything was going. You could do anything to these slaves, but to see that there are regulations in the Old Testament show that progressive revelation is starting to work. Now, it works down through the ages, down through the first century, the intertestamental time, from the last book of the Old Testament to the New Testament, down through the Middle Ages, down through the Renaissance and Enlightenment, to today, people reflecting on what natural theology is and what natural rights are and where they come from. The originators of what natural law is were Christians reflecting on what the nature of God is, saying that, or seeing that we were created in the image of God. That makes us fair. It makes us equal. That was a major force in international law and in our own law tradition in America, which traces back to British law in the Blackstone commentaries. So I think there's more to it, that it doesn't explicitly condemn slavery in the Old Testament. It does it in a more profound way through stories, through a narrative. Just looking at it, you have to look at the whole picture, not just the trees. And this is something I try to get to my kids also. You have to look at the whole context in the whole historical milieu, which is, which that information is being conveyed. I'm done.
Okay, frustrated.
So in other words, you can't look at the fact that these are laws that were given to man on how to treat the slaves because of reasons. Like what is how exactly can we not see that this is the Bible condoning slavery by giving them laws on how and who are slaves and what you can and cannot do with them? How are we to look at this differently than that? As this is a document of people who are being told how they are to treat other human beings, and not just saying, hey, human beings, the owning of human beings is morally wrong, so don't do it.
Go ahead.
Can I reply? Okay. I think you're kind of playing the postmodern game and not taking theological history as significant. When you take a wooden literal view of biblical interpretation and say, if it doesn't explicitly condone it, well, then it's not from God. Not only are you presupposing some moral standard that says slavery is objectively evil, you're also playing the postmodernist game in looking at just the trees, the particular examples, and not taking a step back and looking at the whole woods. Daniel Dennett understands this problem when he came up, he talked about something called, and I want you all to look this up, called the frame problem in psychology. It was where artificial intelligence, they tried to get artificial intelligence systems to do certain things, but they could not, because it was far too complex, and it took value systems, not just us understanding something by reason, but it had to change a person's culture, and that takes years to get them to see and to understand something. You have to change a person's heart, not just their intellect. So to condemn the biblical text because it doesn't explicitly condemn slavery is not looking at the whole context and not taking theological history seriously.
I think the argument would be, though, if you're going to default to a deity for some kind of moral guidance, if that deity doesn't have the wherewithal to state very clearly that such a thing is an egregious act, I can't say that's a very moral God.
And
that's what
fair,
I was going to say. I was going to
the first three commandments are the commandments that people take away the most, that kind of outline how you're supposed to be as a person. The first three are about not having any gods before him. They're about him. Nowhere in that does it say anything about the owning of people, and you would think that would be pretty high on the list of things. It by not outright saying it condones slavery by just telling people how they should monitor, treat, which how long they can be slaves. It maps out slavery in black and white, basically.
Let me add
Can I go one last time on this?
Let SJ go, because she hadn't gone the past couple times, and then we'll let you wrap up. No, hit frustrated.
I'll just say, when we look at the Bible as a whole, we're kind of supposed to take all 66 books and put them together and look at them for the overall message that the entire Bible gave. And I think that the best overall message is just looking at the example of Jesus Christ. And he gave us 2 commandments: love God above all else and love our neighbors as ourselves. And if we're going to follow his commandments of, and even his example of how he treated people and how he was working in the pits of society, he was helping some of the lowest in society. He elevated prostitutes, he elevated people from the lowest parts of society, tax collectors, and that. I think just looking at his example, we should emulate that and emulate the entire reason why the Bible was written in the first place and what occurred with him. So I think I'd go away from trying to focus on, onesie-twosie passages from the Old Testament and look at the entire book as its full message on Jesus Christ.
So what is God's stance on slavery then? Does he condone it or condemn it?
He regulated it during the time.
I think we understand through progressive revelation. Well,
but the question is, either God accepts it as good.
I think
God does not accept it as good, and he's against it.
God does not accept it as good, Steve, but he regulated it. He didn't. Like, for example, God didn't accept divorce.
One second. Let me get the question out first. So God regulates slavery, but in no time does he condemn it then. Why is that? Why would a morally just God, if he wants us to understand how we act normatively, why would he not just say, instead of regulating, and say, hey guys, don't do this. This is bad.
Regulating is like condoning, because if the government says,
in some way,
let's take marijuana for example. All right, if the government comes in and says, well, we're not going to say that marijuana is completely legal, but we're going to regulate it. We're going to put restrictions on it. We're going to put taxes on it. That is the government condoning the use of marijuana. I mean, there's no doubt that if you regulate it, you condone it. Otherwise,
that's exactly
you would not condone it. And
if I could reply, it does seem that when you only take a particular passage out of the context of the whole theological history and how these ideas have shaped history. Now, if you're just you're gonna say, oh, well, the Bible should have said it. Perhaps the people weren't ready to hear that. Perhaps in their cultural context, they weren't ready to hear that. And it took the evolution and progression through many innovations, cultural innovations, for them to be in a way
ready to hear
prepared
for
that.
It's his people.
Or mixed fabric. They were ready to hear mixed fabric.
Exactly.
They were ready to hear that you couldn't eat shrimp or mixed fabric.
Yeah.
They weren't ready to hear that you don't own people, but they were ready to hear that you shouldn't wear mixed fabric or eat shrimp.
Exactly.
That makes no sense. That makes zero sense.
It makes no sense.
Sorry, let me.
When did God care about what people were ready to hear? That's my question. When did God ever care about what people were ready to hear?
And
I think something that
the same God who will sit there and says, all these people are being immoral, let me kill them with a flood, then turns around and also says, oh, hey, guess what? I can't tell them no. Slavery is